Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's your host, 1HP Tom, back at it again, and today we have another amateur review, this time on Sonic Frontiers, the Final Horizon DLC. Fun fact, I already reviewed Sonic Frontiers once before, and it was my very first review on this channel. You can check out that review, it's around 50 minutes long, in the link in the description, where I really rip Sonic to shreds. And I'm not going to try to rip him to shreds this time, because I really do like Sonic and I want the game to be good. But there are issues with the DLC that we're going to be addressing in this. But I'm not going to overdo the intro, so let's get into the video by starting off with the characters. So in Sonic Frontiers, the Final Horizon DLC, you can play as 4 playable characters. You can play as Sonic, Amy, Tails, and Knuckles. Not particularly in that order, but that's besides the point. They all have skill trees. Sonic's skill tree is based off of the main game stats, whereas the other 3 are solely in this extra side story. So the issue I have with the skill tree for the characters is that it has locked basic functionality that is pretty much required for you to do anything in this game. Like the first move on the skill tree, which I'm pretty sure is just already unlocked for characters, is jump. Then double jump. Boost is locked behind something, and then you start getting into like the true extras to help make your character great. I don't know why they couldn't think of other things instead of putting basic things behind a unlockable skill tree, but whatever. Amy's character had these cards, fortune cards or something, that she used to help her glide or hover in the air, and she only used the hammer only for the side loop, which I thought was weird. It wasn't until I watched Good Vibe Gaming's John Cartwright talk about how the hammer was barely ever used that I realized that, wow, he's right. The hammer is like Amy's trademark and she's never using it. It may be just for that one side loop move, but that's literally it. Kind of disappointing, but that is what it is. She has some cartwheel move that helps her boost faster or makes her look cool while boosting, but like I just thought it was strange that the skill tree didn't have fighting moves as much as Sonic's did, which kind of made it weird for the characters to even like fight the sub-bosses in the game. Like I never really, like I tried using like Knuckles for a fight and it just never really felt good. Like it didn't feel right, so I just stopped using him and just kept all the fighting to Sonic, because I also wasn't going to go through the whole hassle of trying to level up all my characters to max stats, so there was really no point in using the extra characters to fight these enemies. But anyway, so Amy's kit was okay. Like it was different enough, but there is one major problem with all their movesets, which kind of just make it like they shouldn't have even been playable in the first place. But we'll touch on that once we get to the end of the character section. Okay, now we're going to talk about Knuckles. Knuckles' moveset was cool. There was issues with the glide though. Like it wasn't fluid. If you've played any other Sonic game that has Knuckles as a playable character, you will know that Knuckles' glide has always been like the best part of him, and it hasn't really been that finicky. Whereas in Sonic Frontiers, Knuckles' glide is very choppy, and it solely comes down to the animation that gets you into the glide. Because when you would glide as Knuckles in any other game, you would just go right into it. In this game specifically, Knuckles kind of goes backwards and then stretches himself out and then goes. Kind of like he's winding up, which in a way doesn't make it really fun. But once you get the infinite glide, I guess it does get a little bit better because he doesn't drop altitude, and it kind of makes sense because he's going super fast with the glide. But I will also say that the infinite glide does need some work. And the only reason why I say that is because it just felt too fast. And with the fact that you're holding the boost and then trying to maneuver the camera angle, and the camera angle is not really responding the way it should, I feel is like it's a problem, because there's plenty of times after I unlocked this move where I actually was trying, like I had to make a giant circle just to kind of correct a mistake because I've missed a platform because I was just gliding just a little bit too low. So besides that, Knuckles' character was fine. He had some boost move where if he was on the ground and boosting, he was like a drill, which was cool. I still don't like the fact that he didn't really have any fighting moves, like I mentioned earlier, but I mean, like, it's whatever. Anyway, that's all I really have to say about Knuckles, though. Tails, though, and I got some stuff to say about him. Because with Tails, there's a lot of issues. The number one thing being he doesn't have a homing attack, which is literally like the main thing that every character should have. He throws wrenches, which I understand what they were trying to go for, and I did think it was clever. But in the grand scheme of things, oh man, like I really don't think they should do that, because like I understand like there's situations where that could work, but for Tails specifically, having to hold the glide while you're doing this and then also hitting the interaction button to throw wrenches felt very awkward unless you were like playing like a claw playstyle, like we're playing an FPS game. It just like, what are we doing here? You know, like I didn't like that. That was just weird. I did think it was innovative, but I really didn't think it was viable long term. And the fact that Tails throws wrenches instead of having a homing attack really doesn't make him viable for fighting at all. And the only way I would see Tails ever being viable for fighting is because of this next thing I'm going to talk about. He has the Tornado. The Tornado from Sonic Adventure 2 is back, and it's one of Tails' greatest moves ever, because once you have max rings, you can literally fly at any altitude the whole entire time. And if you have the infinite boost symbol on your boost meter, you can literally fly forever, which is awesome, which kind of cheapens the game a bit. But you can even get this blaster on the Tornado that can hit for 20 hits or more. I don't know. I've never really tested it on an enemy, but I tested on some blocks that take 20 hits to actually break, so I'm gonna just stick with that. But besides that, the issues I have altogether with all the characters is the fact that they lack fighting, like I've mentioned, and it feels like they were trying to make the characters like Sonic so they could compete in the world with Sonic. That's an issue. There was no individuality. I mean, there was individuality with these characters, but here's the problem. If you're just trying to make all the characters as fast as Sonic so they have some type of fun feature to it, that's just a cheap gimmick to try to get people to want to play as those characters. Like, I'm sure if you've played Sonic Adventure 2, you weren't looking for a character to just always go fast all the time, right? That wasn't your main focus. Like for Knuckles, you were locating treasure in the Mastered Emerald shards. If you were playing as Tails, you were doing things in the Tornado to like either break into Gun or thwart Eggman or whatever, you know. Don't really think we broke into Gun, but that's besides the point. We were hated by Gun in that game, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, it's the fact that there was things that it felt like they just were trying to make them like Sonic in such a way that it just didn't feel right. Like they were going too fast, they were too out of control. The momentum that plagued Sonic in the base game plagued these characters in this DLC, and I didn't like that one bit because I felt like that was missing the point of why these characters are different than Sonic. The mechanics. There are even Sonic moves in this that don't even work correctly. Like take the sidestep. Usually when you do a sidestep in any Sonic game, you line up perfectly on the track to actually continue on the journey. Whereas with this, that's not the case. A few times I was doing a sidestep, it just throws me off the obstacle instead of keeping me on and like locking me in that track. And let's also take the homing attack. There was the third tower, specifically the third tower. Hopefully I put it up on the screen when I'm talking about it. The third tower, right? it's all about fans. It was either the third or fourth tower, I forget which. But when I did this tower, it was horrendous, because what happened is I would do a stomp on the fan mechanism to activate the fan, and then the fan would activate, and then I would target the rail so I could actually get onto the rail. And you know what? I would mash that interact button square so many times, and Sonic wouldn't react. And in my mind, I think, what is wrong with the game? Because in any other instance of Sonic, you could do this no problem. Like, they were limiting your potential of mechanics, and it just didn't make sense. So oftentimes I would fall right to the ground and I would have to start all over again. And I'm just like, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. I'm pressing the homing attack, and I also just think it's asinine that you can't home attack after you do something like that, which is so weird. And this also leads me to another thing. On that same tower, you get to a point where there's these rings that have 2 boosts, and you're supposed to like fling yourself to another one and then fling yourself back. Which, I mean, the whole trick about that is you should just fling yourself upward and you kind of skip that other ring. But every time I tried going to that second initial ring, I would gain the momentum. I'd be going around the ring, and I would launch myself over to it. And if I boosted, Sonic became, what's the word I'm looking for? Permeable? He would just phase through objects and wouldn't attach them to the rail. Like, I would get super close to the rail. I'm like, I would phase through this rail, and then I would hit the booster on the bottom part of that rail, and then I would never actually get on the second loop to shoot myself backwards. And I find a great issue with that, because that shouldn't happen. And it's like, when did Sonic's boost prevent him from doing things? And I don't remember that being an issue in the main game, but it probably is. But it's just like, I don't know if they play tested this game, bro. I just don't know. It's just frustrating. But on that note, we're going to move on. Now we're going to talk about the difficulty. One of the major problems with the Sonic Frontiers DLC is the difficulty level. And that's kind of concerning, because I understand it's a free DLC and everything, but the fact that it's only for the best of the best players, that even easy mode is kind of difficult, even for like somebody who's played most Sonic games like myself, is kind of odd. Because I mean, I've put up with a lot of Sonic BS before, and like trying to 100% games and whatnot, but this almost feels almost nearly impossible. And I haven't even got to why the main point of the DLC is a problem, because I was even having problems climbing these towers when you get control of Sonic. Like, Sonic stuff is so much harder than every other character's things to do that it's kind of ridiculous that you have to go through these hang-ups. And the fact that if you turn on easy mode and like the things that should be there to help you out aren't there in normal mode doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like they moved the difficulty from normal down to easy, and then subsequently did the same thing with hard mode to normal, and then extreme to hard. And that's just talking about the hub world, because I've had plenty of issues climbing these towers because of something I didn't anticipate getting up on the tower, or overshooting myself, okay? Not like over-momentuming. What am I even trying to say? Overshooting myself over a thing, an obstacle, because I misjudged like the speed that Sonic can go at or something, which is kind of like makes me afraid to even like try to attempt something at full speed, because then it's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to do this without having that homing attack buffer? But then, oh well, I can't even have that because apparently the game's too easy. So now it's just odd. And I'll get to the reason why this is bad, but the main issue, and I don't know if I even have footage of that specific challenge, but there are trials at the top of these towers, okay? And they limit Sonic's abilities to make it more challenging, and you have a certain time limit to get these challenges done in. The second challenge is almost nearly impossible unless you put it on easy mode, which for me, I did it so many times that the game asked me to drop the difficulty level, and I didn't want to, but I was smashing through the menu so fast that I kind of just accidentally kind of did, and like I felt really bad about it because I was like, oh well. But then I realized I have nothing to prove. I've already beat this game on expert mode or extreme difficulty, so it's like whatever. So it gave me an extra 10 seconds to do that challenge. But for like an average player who may or may not be good at Sonic, how are they going to enjoy this if they're forced to kind of struggle with it? Like, I was fuming on some of this stuff, and it's just like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, but it leaves a sour taste in your mouth, you know? It's just bad. But that's not even the worst challenge. The worst challenge is the last tower, where you have to do a boss rush mode where you fight the first 3 titans. You have to have it a perfect parry to block their attacks, and then Sonic's levels drop down to 1, and then no rings actually respawn. Now, on paper, I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem too bad, but actually doing it was the worst thing ever. And the only reason why I was even able to do it is because I switched it to easy. But then here's the issue with that. When I completed that challenge, I only had 5 rings left out of the 400. And for a casual player who's literally, or even just a little kid who's trying to be like, oh, Sonic gets this new form and I want to see it in action instead of looking it up on a YouTube video, like, it's kind of messed up that you can't just naturally do it on normal difficulty. Like, I mean, it's fine to have a little of a bit of a challenge because you have to work for it, right? But to make it almost nearly impossible to do on normal for the average player is what makes this bad. That even to the point where, oh, I made like maybe a couple mistakes in that last fight and I ended up narrowly beating it with only 5 rings. That's messed up. So, like, that challenge specifically should have been in extreme difficulty. That's how extreme difficulty should have been, because the one-hit KO nonsense in extreme difficulty was too easy, considering that parries, you could just hold parries the whole freaking time. Which, I mean, when I first played this game and I was playing Wyvern, the second boss, for the first time, I really thought that parries had to be perfect the whole time. So when I first did it, that fight was so much harder because it took me forever to figure out that, oh, you don't have to like just hit it at the right time. And then I was like, oh, well, now this is getting better. But the fact that the indication is also crap as well isn't the best either. But that's why the difficulty really can deter a player from even attempting to do this. And like I said before, you could bring up the fact that, oh, it's optional, but I'm just like, it doesn't matter if it's optional. It's a free DLC. Like, if they're gonna offer it to the player, at least make it playable for the average player. Like, Sonic Team and Sega are making it seem like, oh, well, you have to be the best of the best to even be able to enjoy this game or this section of the game. And that's messed up. Like, you're gatekeeping at that point. And it's like, that's wrong. I hate that. And that's why, like, this is a major point off on Sonic Frontier, even as a whole. What? Cyberspace is pointless in this DLC. I didn't touch any of the cyberspace levels until right before I was ready to fight the final boss. None of this is required, and it's not even really talked about. Like, you know how in the beginning of Sonic Frontiers, they kind of guide you to the cyberspace thing and kind of explain to you what it is and why you need to do them, and they make more sense there than they do here. So in the DLC, they're kind of just sitting there. Same with it kind of goes hand in hand with the sub bosses, because you need to beat the sub bosses to get enough gears to unlock these things. Funny enough, though, I didn't really have to fight sub-bosses to actually unlock these things. Like I said, you can just find everything on the ground if you just side loop certain area points, which is very bizarre that they would do this. But after playing these levels, I understand why they did it this way, because all these cyberspace levels literally don't make any sense. They're all very disjointed and very challenging, and there's actually no point in even doing them. That's how bad it is. It's actually kind of crazy. So there are 3 collectibles to collect in every single one of these things. There are these moon coins that you have to collect in a certain amount of time or they disappear. Then you have the countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have to get it in that specific order, which that's nothing new to Sonic either. And then there are animals that you have to pick up and carry and find. Like first you have to find them, then you have to pick them up, and then after you pick them up you have to carry them to the goal. But then what they don't tell you is, oh, Sonic's jump is stifled and he can't really attack enemies when he's holding these animals with his hands behind his back. So then you just think to yourself, well, what is the point of even doing these? If the stage is already difficult enough, and then tacking on these challenges just to get Lookout Coco, which you can literally just get Lookout Coco from the hub world by doing side loops on all like the little treasure points, you're most likely going to get a gear or a Lookout Coco. That's just how they made the game. Like they were basically saying, oh yeah, like these cyberspace levels are just here, even though we could have just taken them out and just ignored them, because some of these challenges are stupid difficult. And there was only one that, funny enough, I somehow naturally got an S rank, and I just found that hilarious. But there was a lot of them where, since there are no checkpoints in the stage, that I was just like, yeah, I'm just quitting, just grabbing the footage for this video. So like that's pretty much it. But man, it's just something that they thought this was even a good idea. Like I don't know if they were trying to test something, but well, let me also run through some of the things that I saw in the cyberspace levels, because they all had like a different objective, right? Like there was some where you were racing against a shadow of tails. There was one where you were racing against the clock with a bomb on your head, and you had to get extra time as you were going along to complete the stage in time. There was one where you had a speedometer locked on the screen, and the faster you would go, the faster the speedometer would level up. And if you hit something, it would drop back into low gear. It was like, why is this permanently fixed on the screen though? And it's just overall just a bad time. I think I had a better time doing the regular cyberspace levels, but funny enough, some of the cyberspace levels in this were just like, I guess, remixes of the original cyberspace levels. Like they just had extra platforms and different objectives, but with like the same core look and function. So yeah, the only thing that didn't miss on these was the music. The music was fantastic. That's pretty much it. So there really was no point in trying to 100% these either. So I know that I have done videos in the past of showcasing, hey, this is what cyberspace level 1-7 looks like, and so on, in whichever difficulty. But please do not expect me to do that for this DLC, because of the fact that it's literally pointless. There's no reason to do it, and if you're 100% completionist, stick around, because I'm going to put that information in like the very last part of the video, and you're gonna say, yeah, I'm not gonna do it, once you figure out what it is. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably already know, but if you don't know, it's terrible. It's absolutely garbage. The final boss fight. So I got some problems with the final boss fight. Namely, the first thing that I don't like is that we go right into the main game boss without our new power. We kind of just have Supersonic doing like the main game fight. And I initially thought, I was like, we got this supposedly new cool power. For what now? For this? And I was like, okay, this is kind of a killer to the mood, to the grandness of what we're supposed to be going towards. But once you finish that, they kind of twist the boss fight. And in a way, like if you compare it to the main game, I want to say, even though I loved what they did in the main game with the true final boss with the end, I liked the fact that they kind of combined the two bosses together. And I do have an issue with that first phase of the boss fight, and that's because the end connects this cord to the back of the Titan, and you have to somehow unlodge that cord because it's feeding it infinite health, and the game doesn't really do a good job at like reminding you that you can hit the right bumper to change like the target after you hit the head a couple times, to hit the right bumper, and then you can target onto the cord to actually dislodge it. And because the game doesn't do a good job saying that, you only really find out that advice if you either look it up online while you're in the boss fight for the first time, or if you actually let yourself just die, and then the Master King Coco actually gives you that advice. And I just kept trying to beat the thing to death, thinking that I could overpower the infinite health regen, and that didn't really work too well. So I did eventually let my rings hit 0, and apparently the game does this cool thing where you hit double digits in rings, which is, I think, pretty cool. This is also the only Sonic boss fight where you don't die if you're supersonic, which is great. At least for phase 1. Phase 2, you can die supersonic if you miss a parry. Then Sonic will get hit by a blast, he'll lose supersonic, and then he'll lose rings, and you lose a hefty amount of rings, but you technically won't die. So I thought that was a interesting thing to find out myself. However, besides that, the boss fight was cool. I liked the animations and the whole Ultra Instinct thing that Sonic got going on with the animation when you would parry properly. Like, I thought that was pretty cool. Like, the camera angle sucked though when you had to parry those orbs while trying to dislodge the cord in phase 1. It kind of sucked because the trees would be in the way of Sonic, so if you were trying to parry those orbs, you would most likely get hit because you couldn't time it correctly. Besides that, the rest of it wasn't bad. It was pretty good. And like, I wasn't really bothered with the fact that Amy, Tails, and Knuckles didn't really do anything besides just help Sage reinforce a barrier to protect Dr. Eggman. But that was that was besides the point. I mean, I didn't expect them to do anything special in this, especially because the whole crux of the game is, oh, Sonic's fighting all these bosses in Supersonic. Unless they were going to bring like a Hyper Knuckles, Hyper Tails, Hyper Amy type of situation, I wasn't expecting anything like amazing in that regard. Now, I want to go back to the 100% completion thing. And the reward for that, for doing every single thing in the game, that means maxing out all the characters to their max speed, defense, rings, and whatever the fourth category is, I forget. I don't remember. But once you do all of that, for every single character, fight every single sub-boss, do every single cyberspace, get every single collectible, you talk to this Grand Master Coco, even though Master King Coco, whatever, Grandmaster, whatever, he gives you advice. He does not give you anything tangible that Sonic could wear or do. He gives you advice for the second phase of the boss fight. And that is literally the worst reward for 100%, at least in a Sonic game, that I've ever heard and I've ever seen. Because I didn't 100% it, but I saw somebody else put up a video of doing that. And I might link that in the description below if I can find it again. But man, that's just terrible, because like, how do we go from being able to play a Supersonic during a normal stage after collecting 50 rings to cosmetics for like multiplayer and like a new, like a 3D Green Hill Zone in Sonic Adventure 2, to we're getting a crown and like for like the last update in Sonic Frontiers, to, oh, you know what, you're gonna get advice. Like, I really think they just kind of rushed this out the door. I kind of wish they kind of cooked this a little bit longer, but, you know, they didn't. But, yeah, overall, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not the best. But Sonic's always been mediocre, so it's like, it's just more same old with Sonic. It's kind of like Pokemon. You take Pokemon for example. Game Freak craps the bed all the time, right? With Pokemon. So for Sega and Sonic Team to do the same thing with Sonic, it's like the same thing. We want these games to be good at the end of the day, and we want them to feel good, so it's like, okay, like they age well, but they just look at the dollar signs, and it's just like yeah, they do put a lot of effort into the music, and you can feel like the passion that they put through. And I'm not trying to accuse any of the employees just to be chasing dollar signs, because that's usually just the people at the top who are. But I kind of just wish they put forth more of an effort to kind of iron out these things, so I'm not on here just nitpicking, because I don't want to just nitpick. I want to be like, oh, this is awesome, this is beautiful, like the animation is great, the gameplay is subpar, but like at the end of the day, like you kind of do have to turn your brain off a bit and be like, oh, well, that's just how Sonic is, and that's how Sonic has been for a long time now, like 13 years it's been, like, kind of subpar. I mean, I understand like Colors was pretty good mechanically, Lost World was good mechanically ish, like, you know, Sonic Boom, just throw that game in the trash. We don't even talk about that game anymore, but like, we just wanted to be good, right? So with that all out of the way, let me know down below what you guys think of the Sonic Frontiers Final Horizon DLC. I am still a Sonic fan. Like, yes, the game may not be a 6 out of 10 anymore to me. It's still just a subpar Sonic game, and that's just how it is. However, you'll still see me next week playing Sonic in the new Sonic Superstars when it releases on October 13th. So let me know down below what you guys think of this DLC, and I will see you guys later. See you.